people can expect, even in a time of strike, a minimum level of public service. That's what, for example, France and other European countries do. Angela Rayner has said she will repeal that, which is a very reasonable measure, within 100 days of Labour taking office. Keir Starmer, far from disowning her, has actually said it was a brilliant speech. So here I think we let Labour's let the Marr slip. They've admitted the fact they're in the hock to the trade unions, who provide a huge part of Labour's funds. So I think people will sit up and take notice, people who support the minimum service legislation.
One of her headline lines, if I can put it that way, was that Labour would introduce an economy that really worked for working people. Do you think the economy works for working people now?
Well, look, I think in terms of, it's very popular, things like the minimum service level, some of the anti-strike legislation actually works for working people. Who actually takes the train in the morning to get into work? It is working people. Who actually uses ambulances and depends on other services for their livelihood and their well-being is actually working people. So I think a lot of what we're doing is to benefit working people.
A lot of the people who will be voting in the general election are unionised workers. What are you offering them?
Well, what we're offering them is continued prosperity, access to the economy, record low levels of joblessness. Unemployment remains at a 30-year low, employment at a high. These are the things, real jobs for real people.
Well, if I look at the number of days lost from either strike action or from allied action over the last year, it is absolutely astonishing. It's the highest since records began in 1931. 690 days lost average in July this year. That's the highest, as I say, since 1931. The previous highest was 530 stoppages in March 1970. And you look across the board, you look at the graphs, and the number of days lost from strikes or stoppages is almost out of control, which suggests that whatever you're doing in terms of unionised labour in this country, you're losing the argument. It's not going well, is it?
Well, actually, we've solved quite a number of those strikes. Let me say that first of all. We're working continually at getting strike action down. It's a really important part of how we deliver on Rishi's five-point plan, particularly when it comes to hospital waiting lists. But I don't think, Andrew, anybody seriously believes that the number of strikes would be lower under Labour. I think most people think it would be higher under Labour. That has always been their experience, that Labour has been terrible at managing strike process.
Greg, it's rarely been as bad as it is at the moment under the Conservatives.
Well, but we are dealing with it, Andrew. We are getting those number of strike days down. We're working at it very, very hard. Rishi Sunak, Steve Barclay, the rest of the cabinet working really hard at getting those strike days down. Mark Harper at Transport. But I think it would be far worse under Labour.
Let me turn to another thing. The triple lock we were talking about at the beginning of the programme is a disgrace, isn't it?
No, it isn't. No, the triple lock has actually delivered, on average, about £3,000 per annum better on the state pension than in 2010.
Oh, it's delivered that for pensioners. But if you look forward, the way it's put together means that inevitably, it is going to be unsustainable. Every economist who looks at it thinks that, and yet the government is just looking the other way because you're worried about older voters in the election.
No, I disagree with that. It's actually worked well for the last 13 years. It is right that we look after pensioners properly.
And so you're going to keep it?
We've done that for 13 years. Well, the commitment at the moment is strongly to the triple lock. It has worked very well for us the last 13 years. I'm not going to commit to how in the autumn statement or beyond fiscal tax decisions. Those are properly a matter for the Chancellor, for the Prime Minister, for the Secretary of State for Work and Pensions.
There was a suggestion from one of your colleagues, Mel Stride, today the government might look again at the bonus element of the extra pay numbers that have come in today, the 8.5%. And by doing that, they would reduce the amount by which pensions went up.
Government's got a strong commitment to the triple lock, Andrew, a strong commitment to the triple lock. But when it comes to the process here, I'm not going to preempt anything that might be in the autumn statement or in fiscal statements beyond that.
Let me ask you about one other thing that Angela Rayner brought up today, which is 0 hours contracts. These are widely hated, and yet the government's going to do nothing about that.
Well, we've had this argument before, and Ed Miliband made it the centrepiece of his 2015 election campaign. You'll remember well, Andrew, that was one of his
Didn't go very well, but that doesn't mean he was wrong about it.
Well, look, I think the government did take action at the time on 0 hours contracts. We'll continue to look at that situation. But I'm not seeing that translating into a big issue out there for people. I think people are much more worried about inflation. That's why the government's main focus is on inflation, bringing down hospital waiting lists, restoring growth, bringing down the debt and stopping the boats. Those remains the government's focus.
And after, nearly 2 weeks of the new political term, the new political autumn, the latest poll shows you still 20 points behind Labour. Nothing is moving on the dial, and you're running out of time.
Well, what the polls show is what they've shown most of the year, which is there's a huge number of don't knows. The don't knows disproportionately come from former Conservative voters. That, if you like, is the bad news for me as Conservative Party chairman. The good news is that these people are receptive to Conservative Party messages and could come back to us. They haven't defected to Keir Starmer. There's no love for Keir Starmer.
So
I've yet to meet anybody, Andrew, come to the door in this country. And I've been up and down the United Kingdom all year. Nobody's yet come to the door and said that Keir Starmer is the solution to their problems.
And yet they look at what's happening day in, day out, and they know there are problems. 2,000 migrants one day last week.
Well, obviously, the number arriving by boat is down on this time a year ago. But we've got a lot of work to do. I agree with that. There's a lot of work to do. We've done really important agreements. The numbers coming from Albania are down 80% or more. These are really, really good progress, but we've got a lot of work to do.
So what does the rest of the autumn look like for you? You've got 3 by-elections. Of those 3, what is the most important one for the Conservative Party?
Well, look, I think they're all important for us. We always take every election seriously. We're the only party that runs across the United Kingdom, so we'll be running in all 3 of those. They're all important for us.
What's your sense in your waters of your prospects in those 3?
Well, look, governments always...
You're not going to take Rutherglen and Hamilton West under any circumstances that I can see. So we're talking really about Tamworth and we're talking about Mid-Beds. Which of those 2 are you more worried about?
Well, the government, as you know, often struggles to win by-elections. It's been the case on successive Labour, coalition, Conservative governments. There's no
So you're not expecting to win either of those?
Well, look, we'll see. We've got great candidates. I've just been in Mid-Bedfordshire today with our candidate, Festus Akinbisoya. He is amazing. He has a fantastic recognition on the doorstep. He's the police and crime commissioner there. He is a really, really strong candidate for that by-election on the 19th of October.
I deduce from your answer that Mid-Beds looks a little better to you than Tamworth, but I might be wrong.
Well, I mean, Tamworth, we're selecting a candidate. We'll be running there very, very strongly indeed, and very hard to hold Tamworth. But I repeat, it's difficult for governments of all stripes to hold constituencies in by-election.